all for joining us this evening, and members of the audience will look forward to hearing from our poets shortly. I'm just going to ask the secretary if she will call for.
Chair Kaplan,
Here.
Vice Chair Kleist,
Here.
Linda Bailey,
Here.
Brandy Collins, Kendall Taylor,
Here.
Matt Harris,
Here.
Hillary Orr,
Here.
Ajaysha Thomas,
Present.
Marat Omey, Jesse O'Connell.
Here.
Okay, Chair Kaplan, you do have a quorum. 1, 2, 3. We have 8 present. We are missing Brandy Collins and Marat Omey.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to take the poets out of order, and I was supposed to remind everybody, and I forgot to do this myself, to key on the mics, which Josh just reminded me after I did the introduction without my mic on, so those who are listening on the Zoom can hear. And when we introduce our poets, you'll be reading your poets from the podium, where we have a microphone that you can turn on. So I will go ahead. This is a board favorite every year where we have dashing words in motion, and our representative from the Office of the Arts is here, Ms. Colton. I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce the program, the poets who are here, and we look forward to hearing the wonderful work that you've done about how buses inspire you.
Is this on? What do I do? Okay. Cheryl Ann Colton. I'm a regional program director with the Office of the Arts, and really want to thank the Alexandria Transit Company for this collaboration. I was trying to think back. It's been, I think, 10 years that we've had this collaboration, and it really means a lot, I think, to the citizens and also the poets, to have their work displayed on the buses. Just so that you know a little bit about process, we do have a literary panel that reviews all of the entries that come in. There are criteria, and they basically, select your poets. I think we had 64 poems that we reviewed. So that's a lot of poetry. So I'm gonna have each of the poets actually introduce themselves. We have 4 poets that were not able to make it. So the poets have graciously accepted reading the missing poet that's not here today. So Zaina, did you want to start? And then everybody else can just come on over. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl Ann, and thank you for inviting us to be with you today. My name is Zaina Azam, and I'm the Poet Laureate of the City of Alexandria. I'm delighted to be back here. And I'm going to read a poem by another person who cannot be here, and then I'll read my own. I just want to note that the poems, we had a word limit of 30 words. So this was kind of a challenging thing for all the poets to stay within. So I just wanted to alert you to that. So I'll read the poem by Jonathan Lewis. It's titled Grateful For. Grateful for my free commute. There is no fare, while low emissions clear the air. An easy choice without the fuss. So glad we can all take the bus. And this is my poem. It's titled What We Hold Dear. People mover, circulator, wheelchair and bicycle carrier. The bus holds near what we hold dear. It uplifts words of community. Reading, writing, admiring poetry is so inspiring. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for having us. My name is Casey Candela. In my day job, I'm a civil rights lawyer, but we're after hours now, so I'm a poet. I'll be reading my own poem and the poem of another winner, Anthony Smith. I'll read Anthony's first. It's titled The Bus. The bus. Reflections of friends visible in the seats. The bus. Strangers among me, people I'll never meet. The bus. I want to know them, our connections incomplete. The bus. My poem is called Boarding. And as you listen, how many forms of transportation can you find in the poem? It's a bit of a riddle. Headlights train on the weary, bleary-eyed, waiting to be ferried to work. Zipper merge and file on, find a seat or hold on, movement underway. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Pretty much. So we've got headlights train, ferried, zipper merge is a traffic pattern, and headlights are also on cars, I think, and trains and buses. And the poem is about boarding the bus. We've got 4. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Krista Edwards, and I am new to poetry. So, well, I've been writing for a while, but new to being published. So it's my first published poem. I'm going to read someone else's and then I'll read mine. I'm reading Christina Coker's, and her poem is called Dashing Through Alexandria. Dashing around here we go, Alexandria, history on view today. Riding the King Street Hill down, Potomac River, Old Town, square blocks unfolding. We dash west end to river, rested in ease, smooth travels for work and play. My poem is called Roadways Traveled. It's basically kind of about the different paths you would take along transportation that also can incorporate into your own life as well. Life sets you on many paths, like a bus or train, directing you as you coast, stopping here, stopping there, until the plan is revealed and you find your way. Thank you.
Thank you for having us today. My name is Elizabeth Reese. I am a historian, and I usually write about the American Revolution, so it's nice to write about modern technology. I'll be reading 2 poems, one from Rose Dallimore, who is not able to make it today, and my own poem. I'll read Rose's first. It is called 102 Thrums in the Rain. Soaked shoes student sits beside bleary teacher. Take my umbrella, tight smile. Wish he knew how often someone helped when I journeyed alone. 102 departs, gathering up folks who need each other. And my poem is called Togetherness. In the shadow of King Street, strangers gather, collecting their belongings and shuffle aboard. A moment of unity after years of separation, find us together on our blue city bus. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. And I know, Zaina, you've been here before as our poet laureate. Are the rest of you all first-time entrants into this? That's wonderful. Thank you. These really, they make us smile, and hopefully our passengers, as they see them on the overhead boards, will enjoy and get a little bit of calm and rest. I remember last year coming in, I had been racing to get here, and I was stressed, and my breathing calmed as I listened to your poems, and it's really wonderful. Thank you all for what you do and for enlivening us with culture.
I think we left copies of it.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, thank you very much for being here. Yes, unless you would like to stay. Maybe you'll be inspired to write a poem about the transit development program. And Josh, who on your staff should we recognize for having been a part of this program?
Well, Caitlin would be it, and she is on the Zoom.
I know she, yeah, I know she's running the meeting
in the sky.
We thank
But
Caitlin
she's hearing
for-
this and
for
watching.
helping
it
ensure
from
this
afar.
program has sustained from 10 years or to
Yeah.
11 years.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the public hearing for the FY24 ATC Transit Development and TDP public hearing. And I just want to clarify that we normally have a separate public comment period as part of board meetings, but given that this hearing is all encompassing, it's on our budget as well as all the transit service to be offered next year, we are collapsing the normal public comment into the public hearing. So if you were planning to speak on a kind of other business item, please do so during the public hearing. And so our public participation policy would apply. So I will read it now as we do at the start of any public comment period. We are about to convene into a public comment period of our meeting. All dashboard meetings include a public comment period, although this is our annual public hearing. We believe it is crucial to hear from our writers and community members. The board is here to listen. However, please keep in mind that a public comment period is not designed to be discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns or questions tonight. We take any concerns and questions seriously and need sufficient time to process and research any issues if need be. Board members will respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have the proper staff member get back to you at the appropriate time. And as this is a hearing, we are recording and capturing everything that was offered, and it will be taken into consideration our deliberations on the TDP and the budget, which we approve later in the spring. Please note that personnel matters are not a part of public comment. However, please know we take any personnel questions seriously. You are asked to contact Dash administration with any such concerns. We ask that all speakers and members of the audience maintain civility and respect for any divergent views that others possess. Further, we ask that speakers please address their comments to the board directly rather than the audience. The board will take pre-registered speakers first, and then I will invite others who wish to speak who may not have pre-registered. For future meetings at our public comment period, you may pre-register on the website dashbus.com on the board of directors page. I will now call the first speaker, and our normal rules apply. So please remember each speaker is allotted 3 minutes for comments. And if speaking on behalf of the Neighborhood Civic Association or Unit Owners Association, please identify yourself accordingly and you will be permitted up to 5 minutes. So I will ask the staff now first if anyone in the room has registered for the hearing, and then we will take any pre-registrants who are on the Zoom. After which I will ask if anyone in the room who did not pre-register wants to be recognized, and then we will give a moment for anyone on the Zoom to use the raise hand function if you would like to be recognized. The board is ready to hear comment. Are there any pre-registered?
Chair Kaplan, no one has pre-registered to speak.
Okay. So I assume that includes the Zoom as well. Right?
Correct.
Okay. Is there anybody in the room who wishes to? Wow. Do you have a gift for us? Oh, okay. All right. And we'll now pause and ask if anybody on the Zoom would like to be recognized. We'll give you a moment. Again, use the raised hand feature if you'd like to be recognized.
We'll allow Caitlin to confirm whether there's any speakers.
No one has raised their hand yet.
All right, thank you. I believe we need a motion to close a public hearing, even though no one spoke. So, okay. Moved by Steve, second by Matt. All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that was quick. We'll move into the approval of the Board of Directors minutes from the March 8th, 2023 meeting, which were included in our packet. Are there any revisions to the minutes as they were presented? If not, I'll take a motion to adopt them. Moved by Matt, is there a second? Jesse, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. All right, moving to Chair's report. We've done our dashing words in motion poetry. Just 2 other items to make you aware of. One is and you were copied on this, we sent 2 memos per the discussion we had at last month's meeting, one to the city manager thanking the manager for essentially what was full funding of the Dash budget request to continue existing services. We wanted him to know that as this was the first budget that the manager presented from start to finish, we really appreciated. He showed a deep commitment to transit when there are many, many decisions that have to be made of many pressing priorities in the city. And so we wanted him to know that we greatly appreciated what he was doing to help sustain Dash. And then we sent a letter to City Council that also echoed that message, but addressed the supplementals that we had submitted to the manager, which dealt with the unfunded pieces of the FY22 new Dash network and the cost for doing those. And there was a budget, Josh will address this in later detail in his report, but there was a budget question that was submitted by Councilwoman Bagley that asked specifically about the supplemental requests. And so has that been, do we know if that's been issued yet, that budget memo?
Yes, the
Okay.
response has been posted.
Okay, very good. All right. And then I will mention about First Transit and TransDev. So a couple of months ago, we had our well, let me back up. We have a management advisory contract with what was First Transit, and First Transit provides essentially the organization that holds all of the employees except for the general manager. And so they are actually in the room with some of the labor negotiations because it is actually they who sign the contract, although they essentially are pass-through for what we're doing. And they provide some services to us, including a lot of safety and audit type services because they have expertise in running many transit systems and can help us come in as a set of outside eyes to ensure that we're doing things properly. And so those are things that we pay them for and have paid First Transit since 1984. So First Transit transitioned to TransDev, and so we had a brief presentation about that, and that it wouldn't really mean much for us as an organization. The vice president who we liaison with at First is still the same person we're liaisoning at TransDev. I bring this up again because we have a management advisory management services contract with them that is going to expire at the end of essentially our fiscal year. And we have the ability to exercise one-year extensions on that existing contract. And so because we're in the midst of labor negotiations and because we have chosen to use their attorney and their legal representation to help negotiate the collective bargaining agreement, this is probably not the right time to be putting out a solicitation to find a new contract. We also, by just doing a one-year extension, will have the opportunity to kind of figure out how are things working. And as First Transit is completely folded in TransDev, are there any concerns that we need to think about in terms of that contract? And that will give us time then next year if we choose to come out and say, okay, we want to do a solicitation for a new contract. We're not voting on the new contract tonight. This is simply a heads up just to say that that is my intention, that we bring forward a one-year extension on that contract. We will have to ask TransDev essentially what that cost will be. I think we have some leverage because we're in a one-year extension, they're brand new, and I hope that they will, consider that when they prepare their offer to us. So I know Matt had a question or comment.
Yeah, just, is there any advantage price-wise to going with a longer term contract?
Well, we can renegotiate that, and I actually haven't looked at the contract in a little while, so I don't know how many one-year extensions we can exercise on that contract. Mr. Baker might know.
Undefined.
It's undefined.
You can continue to extend it, but right now we're waiting for them to put it through the TransDev process, which we're going to see what they come back with, basically. So I don't, maybe, but I think to the chair's point, 1 year gives us an opportunity to see how the company is doing and whether they're continuing to adhere to the same standards that we came to expect from First Transit.
Just one other item. Are they going to be using the same labor relations folks that we deal with now? And I say this just as a matter of personal knowledge. TransDev is absolutely terrible when it comes to labor relations. No. There have been strikes in the area here. I've dealt with strikes with them all over the country in my former life. So maybe there's a chance to get better, but I think it's something we should definitely ask them about, and whether they want to maintain labor peace, or are they willing to go in a different direction with their employees. So First was excellent. They were absolutely a pleasure to deal with. So I don't know how this will affect their labor relations going forward. I haven't heard anything to the contrary than bad things. So hopefully we should at least look into it and see how they're doing.
Okay. I mean, and Mr. Baker will speak later to the first meeting that was held. And so we're using the counsel that was provided. Is that the same person who was on the negotiating team when we did this in 2019? It's a different attorney. Okay. Okay.
A local person?
It's the First Transit head of labor council.
Oh, okay. That's different.
It's a different person,
It's not
but it's
TransDev. It's a person who came through Laidlaw or
Yeah.
First.
That was
Okay.
folded into Trans,
Yeah, okay.
because they moved over as well.
And that does give me some pause and allays my concerns. So.
Okay, and I would encourage certainly, Mr. Baker, you can have a
Yeah.
further conversation about that as well, and I think you would welcome that. Any other questions on the First TransDev contract extension? And Mr. Baker, will that be coming to us in June?
I'm hopeful to have it to you in May so that you can act upon it either in May or June to give you that time.
All right, thank you. Hillary, TNS report.
There we go. Good evening, everyone. So I only have one item for you tonight. I'm just continuing to check in with you all on the Duke Street in Motion project because it's a big one. And we will have our next advisory group meeting next Thursday. And this is one where we will be kind of laying out some of the actual measures of effectiveness for the different transit options to see how the various concepts work on the corridor. And this is before we go out to the public later this month. So we have our third round of engagement, kind of community push to get people involved and get feedback from April 13th, I believe through the end of the month. And there's going to be a number of other meetings, pop-ups. We have our virtual chat function is live to get feedback from folks. So just wanted to make sure you all were aware of that. There's an open house on April 20th, and that's kind of our big community meeting on that this month. And then we'll be talking about it with you all in May to get an endorsement to the advisory group. And this will be going to council on June 27th.
Or the open house on the 20th is going to be held where?
It is at Bishop Ireton, I believe. That's it.
Thank you, Hillary. I did read WMATA is reopening the yellow line as well is that even a little bit before schedule? Because May 7th, was that the original date? Or I was wondering if I thought it was going to open the same time as Potomac Yard Station. So I was actually, seemed like they were maybe a little ahead of schedule.
I wouldn't call it ahead of
Okay.
schedule, since they were supposed to open and I believe it was sooner than that, but
Okay.
yeah, I
Okay,
don't
well,
know that they
it's-
were trying to line up exactly with the metro station,
Yeah.
but I believe we've been saying May.
The end is coming, which is good. So
It's
for that
coming.
project.
It's
Yeah.
coming. And the metro is coming, so
Yeah.
that's big too.
And then the 11, well, the DC3 shuttle that's running essentially the 11Y route, is that going to stop on May 7th, but then restart in July? Or is the intention they will be able to fund that service to become the 11Y after the yellow line reopens?
I am not sure if they were planning to discontinue service for that kind of 2-month period. I would think probably not, but I can look into it and try and find out for you.
Okay, I was just that when I saw the reopening date, I was wondering if there was going to be a gap or not. It'd be great if they could continue that going, because if they're building up ridership, then to get that so people don't then find another way. in 2
Yes,
months
that's
and
a
start over again.
good question. And I suspect that they will keep that. They're planning to keep that going, but I will double check.
Okay, thank you so much. Anybody else for Hillary? Questions? Our nominating committee, and thank you, Jesse and Matt, for volunteering to do this. So I will let you to decide who wants to present the slate of officers.
Well, since Jesse and I did so much work on this, I think it's appropriate for Jesse to do it, but I don't want to stress him because he's still recovering. In all fairness, Beth did 100% of the work of it. Nothing has changed. The one question I do have, Beth, is were you able to reach Lonnie to confirm the
I did not reach out to Lonnie.
Okay, I mean, I assume unless we hear he can't, we'll just continue on in that vein. Lonnie's always great. He knows the ins and outs of the city like nobody else. So if there's a motion to accept the slate of elected officers as presented, I would entertain that or discussion. Okay, yeah. Am I doing this or you're doing it?
You're doing a good job of this,
Okay.
Matt. You're doing a fabulous job of this.
It's been moved by Marat. Is there a seconded by Steve? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the slate is presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Dave voted for himself. No.
I did. So,
Thank you, thank you. And I've got to say, the officers are doing a fantastic job from top to bottom. Every one of you does really good work. I would never want to be in your positions, so keep it up. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the nominating committee for your work and to Beth. And I will just say, and I'm not going to make a big speech, but just thank you for my colleagues for your confidence and look forward to continuing to serve with all of you in the coming year. We're doing a lot of great work, and it is truly an honor to chair this committee and to have a wonderful vice chair who spent most of his career in the transit industry. Steve is a wonderful resource to me. All right, Strategic Plan Committee, Steve and Murat.
Of course.
All right, well, thank you, Chair Kaplan. Murat and I have met over the past month and a half at least to prepare some draft material for the board members to consider. And we've summarized the findings and the work that we've done. I put this brief slide presentation together just to cover, starting off with just an overview of the strategic planning process. It may have been a while since some of you have engaged in this process, but really spend the bulk of the time focusing on the goals that we developed, proposing for consideration, along with potential objectives that would fall under those goals. Now, I know the last time we met, I shared with the group that we would come up with goals first and then deal with objectives, but we were finding it difficult to separate the two since they very much are linked together. What we have, we're proposing doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the final version is going to look like. But we do want to make sure that we get the board members' feedback as to how to best proceed. So if you can go to the next slide, Josh. Starting off with the mission statement down through plans and metrics is the overarching process that we have engaged in or will engage in through the strategic planning process. We'll spend the bulk of the presentation on goals and objectives. Plans and metrics are an essential part of this, but for example, we have a TDP, which is a very important aspect of our operation, hence the plan developed, and there are other operating plans that we developed to support overall the operation of the agency. We're really going to focus on the goals and objectives, but I did want to sort of recap the mission and vision and then move to the goals and how we develop the three that we're proposing along with those potential objectives. A mission essentially, and we have a mission and a vision statement, but again, the mission statement is what is the purpose? Why are we here? Why do we exist? The vision is what we want to be. Again, the vision statement is aspirational. It's not quantifiable, but it serves as the vision for the agency as to what direction to head towards. And we also want to keep in mind that when we develop our goals, objectives, and as the agency collectively works throughout the year to achieve the objectives, that we keep focused on the vision. Next slide, please, Josh. A goal would be that broad and long-term achievable outcome, but it is just a broad idea, a broad concept, a broad outcome. Certainly not to the degree that it is quantified when we move towards the objective, which is that very specific quantifiable action to achieve what that goal is. And again, we're focusing on trying to reach consensus if we can today on the three goals that we're proposing, and then Murat and I can continue to work towards development of a set of objectives for the board members to consider. So we'll get to the next slide, Josh. The approach that we took was looking at DASH from three viewpoints. The first being the view of DASH from the customer standpoint. How does the agency, how is the agency viewed from the perspective of the user of the system? And we have some characteristics that would describe how we achieve that goal. Next slide, please, Josh. And again, these are potential objectives in that within that service excellent goal, objectives could very well fall into any of these categories, starting with customer and employee safety, down through equity, accessibility, the customer experience, reliability, and the convenience of our service. Again, all of that would be considered should the board wish to have those as strategic objectives into executable plans that are, for the most part, being handled at this time, but we'll certainly provide other opportunities to revisit how we deliver service to our customer. The next slide focuses on sustainability. How do we as DASH continue our existence within the external environment? how we maintain viability, not just in the city as an essential service, but also how do we fit within the region? And we thought this was an important goal to have, since we are useless as an island in the region. And we do need to make sure that we fit within our funding profile from the city, and exploring other potential opportunities for funding sources regionally. But how do we maintain ourselves financially? We also thought it would be important to have elements of environmental stewardship, our regional connectivity, along with establishing and maintaining community partnerships, and continuing to have stakeholder engagement. Again, if we make it an objective, it'll be known to the DASH organization as an organizational imperative, is the phrase I use. So therefore, it should be done and should be considered as an important element. I found from my experience, if it's not in the objective, things tend to drop off as far as the ability for the organization staff to engage in those activities. But again, just as some suggested topics, these 4 potential strategic objectives. The last viewpoint of DASH, if you would be organizational excellence, and how does the organization itself view itself? We want to ensure that DASH provides an environment where people can be personally and professionally satisfied. We want to be the employer of choice. And there's a whole collection of activities that can take place to achieve that goal. And if we go to the next slide, we see that we have some of these potential objectives listed, not just recruiting, but also retaining a qualified workforce, maintaining engagement through workforce development, professional development, training, other types of engagement, but to focus on inclusion within the agency, which again, hopefully will drive personal and professional satisfaction. We also put into this category and state clearly that the objective of the agency is to be innovative and to explore other technologies or any other innovative activities that would help operational effectiveness. And I left it broad in that case because it could be, how do we reduce power consumption in the building? How do we improve the effectiveness of our inspection process to do more inspections in a more timely fashion? Or how do we reduce let's say, a failure rate should we experience something along those lines? But to leave it broad and allow the career staff to actually develop what would be a very specific action plan to achieve that objective, but making sure that the staff realizes that the board, through the strategic plan, believes that it is important to have using technology and other innovative processes to improve the operational effectiveness of the agency. Murat, I'll ask you, and just to make sure Murat gets proper recognition for this, the last meeting we had, he was about, was it 6 hours ahead of us, time zone wise? 8 hours. And he was as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as he is now. But I want to thank him for making himself available in the 8-hour time zone difference and helping out with this process. But I'll, Murat, if you have anything that you'd like to add.
Add a few things to this excellent presentation that you provided. One of the things that Steve didn't mention is maybe he left it for me to fill in, is in the line of work that I am involved and he's involved, and many others here in the room are involved. Without a strategy or strategic plan, funding becomes a little bit of not a problem, but it is easier to have funding with support from a strategic plan and the elements that are carefully interlaced within. So we're hoping that that is also in the back of our minds when we're kind of making these discussions and presenting to the board, that these elements can be programmatically tackled, and then there could be tasks and activities and things like that built into that, and hopefully this will be going forward a document to help the organization. And the other thing that we also paid attention while we were discussing these elements were not to make it obviously board specific and make it more organization specific. So it has a sustainability and continuity built into it. And anybody can pick it up after, say, God forbid, all of us disappear for one reason so they can kind of pick this up and then continue to the working towards the mission. So those are the two things that I wanted to add.
And Marat makes a very good point that when we move towards exploring opportunities for funding, the answer to the first question is it within our strategic plan to do so? If the answer is yes, then the organization should move forward. Funding from other sources as well, but it should be the DNA and fiber by which the organization operates. But again, if we can reach consensus on 3 goals today, Rob and I support continue working and refining objectives.
And Josh. He's also.
Oh, yeah, thank you for reminding me. Also. Both Josh and Beth assisting us, so thank you for that. And Josh also brought on the opportunity to meet with Stacia, and I can't remember her last name, but she has helped out with some organizational development activities with some experience in strategic planning. So we will be relying on her to what I would call put meat on the skeleton that obviously the committee is developing. So thank you for that support, Josh. That's a very good question. I'll leave it up to our chair, but we could either wait for the objectives to be developed and then vote on that, or we could have a vote on the goals this evening.
I mean, it would seem that we would vote on the strategic plan when it's final to adopt it and make it part of ours. I don't know, unless you all would like a formal vote. I think you can get direction from us. I have a fairly good idea of.
Sorry again, if everyone is comfortable with the path that Marat, Josh and Beth and I are taking, then we can proceed. But I wanted to, at the very least, see if we perhaps missed any area that could be considered to be a strategic goal, with the idea that having too many makes it difficult in a very unwieldy document. But I think 3, particularly with the focus that we've taken, I think covers the essential elements of our operation. So if we have consensus of so far with the 3 goals that we are proposing, Marat and I can continue working towards the development of the objectives.
And I want to add one thing, is that you brought a good point. Please consider that, it's 2 people and limited resources. It's not like an army of strategic planners on the team. So that's one of the reasons why Steve had suggested that we start small and then we can iteratively add to it once we gain more traction and then we kind of reach a certain level of maturity. We develop these performance metrics and we start measuring them against something, and then we can kind of start adding more detailed or more, for lack of a better term, complex objectives or goals to it. So I think that was the underlying reason why he suggested, and I agreed with it, and I think Josh and others also agreed to start small. So crawl, walk, run kind of principle.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have a thought, and so I like these 3. I appreciate this is really good. There's a couple things that I like. They're not. I feel like they belong somewhere, but I'm not sure if they're in the right place. There were a couple of things I'm wondering. I don't know if this is even a goal or it's just something that Dash does, but I feel like Dash is a leader in the transit space. And I don't know if it's a goal to be that, to be like, and that's where I'm seeing some of the technology and continuous improvement and the innovation and that kind of component of what Dash does, not only in the tech side, but on the equity side and just as an organization. I don't know where that fits, and I don't know if it's a goal, but it's something that Dash does really well. And I think the city is proud of Dash for that. So I don't know if that fits in here somewhere. It just kind of occurred to me.
Yeah, I appreciate your thought on that, because part of the discussion, and I'll say for any of the objectives, one could argue effectively, I think, say, the second one here should be put into the other goal, depending upon the perspective. We recognize the importance of that, and the way that at least our initial vision was, that would fit into that sustainability category. How do we continue to, to maintain our stature within not just the city, but within the region to be the leader? And I'll say an objective could be written to that extent, or sometimes it could be an organization's core values, and I didn't venture into core values because that's, I'll say, another work task that we didn't necessarily agree to take on, but that could also be a way of handling it. But again, we were trying to keep it to a manageable number, but any suggestions as far as what an objective may look like? That was the one thought I was going to leave everyone with. If for some reason you had a particular interest in any of these proposed goals, proposed objectives, and you had some thoughts as to how the objective could be structured, making it defined outcome quantifiable with a time frame attached to it as I'll call it, not a SMART goal, but in this case, a SMART objective. I'll speak from Rod. I think in this case, we would very much appreciate getting that. But if there's some thoughts you have, please send them to us. Now, from a communication standpoint, you can send them to 2 board members and not violate, or if you send it to everyone, that also is not
You can,
an issue.
well, I'll let Mr. Baker correct me if I'm wrong, but you can.
I didn't explore this
My
area.
understanding is that you can send communication to the entire board. It's just that if there's then, they can reply to you, but if there's a whole conversation to the group, that
Yeah,
would
that's just how I
trigger a
remembered it.
meeting.
So if you have ideas, you can send them, I think, to us all. Marat and I either can, individually sort of follow through to better understand, perhaps if it was unclear. But I would like to make this more than the Steve Marat show, and to get your input. Although I appreciate your reaction to what we're proposed here, but I do want to the extent that I can, and Marat and I would very much welcome suggestions on how to structure some of these, particularly when we get to writing the objectives.
Steve. I had pretty much the same thing. I mean, it seems like you can consolidate some of these objectives, like explore technologies and initiatives to improve operational effectiveness. I mean, you could say that for all 3 of these. So I was wondering, and it's not weighted, like goal 1 isn't more important than goal 3. So I was wondering if maybe just you could consolidate this somehow, because we are the leader in innovation from any perspective you look at it. I mean, some would say we're the best in the country for our size. So, I almost feel like we're trying to make something that's great better, and every extra step incrementally doesn't give us that extra return that we're looking for. So, this is fantastic. I love it. I don't know where it gets us. That's my only issue. And whatever you guys do, I mean, you've done a great effort. I wouldn't want to stifle that in any way.
I wanted to add something. I think you raised a good point of how do we capture that we are already doing, right? How do we do that? And I think, I don't know if that's what you meant, Steve, by the core values, but there has to be some opportunity for us to integrate some guiding principles about, how we run the organization, how the organization is run. So perhaps innovation would be the guiding principle on all of these goals and objectives, and that would capture that, or leadership, right? How do we exercise leadership and in all of these goals and underlying objectives. And, there are some core values that are understood, like you look at customer safety, right? And if you notice, I don't know if you did, but there is no driver safety, because that is a core, right? I mean, that's a principle that any transit agency has to have in their DNA, or else, it would be ridiculous. But how do we capture that? How do we emphasize that, so somebody doesn't come back and say like, oh, what do you mean you're not paying attention to driver safety, right? So perhaps that would be the next exercise that Steve and we can kind of collect your thoughts on everything, and perhaps start developing some guiding principles that would be applicable to all of these goals, and, get into the fine tuning of these and all that based on the feedback that you guys have. So I don't know if it's too premature to make a motion to move anything, but I think I agree with Steve. We would like to know if this is the direction, this is the right direction. So however, we can assure that, I don't want to say we're wasting time, but is this the direction that the board wants to go? We can have a discussion and then it can be in the meeting minutes rather than a motion. But without seeing the actual goals and objectives, it might be difficult to make a motion.
Can I ask a question? Is this based on Dash's existing vision and mission? Like that's Dash as an organization has a vision and mission. Are these goals trying to get us to that vision? Is
That's
that,
how we
is that we're, okay, just want to make sure we're not like
No.
rehashing that. Okay.
Oh, yeah, no, and I'll say, I didn't read them before we started working on goals and objectives, thinking, what, based on our conversations and what we've been interacting, and in my case, going back to, I think it was 2013 or 14 when I first came to the board, but to try to do them independently. But once we arrived at a framework for it, then we went back to the mission and vision statement, and it was very much aligned. And a lot of the metrics that are currently in place through Josh's leadership actually is a very good foundation for the plans that should be developed to achieve the objectives once we start refining that.
And to add what Steve just said, that was one of the reasons why Josh suggested Stacia.
Yeah.
I remember she said station, so I remember the name. So that's why Josh recommended, because Stacia is already working with Josh on many of the performance measures and metrics and things like that. So we thought that, she would be an excellent catalyst to kind of take what we're doing and what is existing, what we're measuring currently, how can we enhance what we're measuring to include these, things like that. So, that was the starting point.
But if we have supportive concept amongst the board members, we can proceed. That works for everyone. In this way, we can come back. Our goal, albeit ambitious, would be to have a document for you to review with more information at the next board meeting. But we'll do the best we can to meet that objective.
Yeah, I'm happy with that approach. One thing I spoke with Steve as the meeting was getting underway. Our general manager has a performance plan, which Steve helped us to develop about 5 years ago. And I think it's important that, and Hillary and I hash over that every year to update the expectations. But I think it's important we look at these and make sure that they are present throughout that document. I think 1 and 3 certainly are. I think parts of 2 are, but we want to make sure that we align that, and that may involve revising some of the expectations. And so, Steve had suggested you might want to be, or Murat might want to at least read that document and then look to see what's there, and is there anything that we need to tweak as we get more clarity on this plan and the specific
For the
goals.
second one, I can see the objectives and the measurement of those would be more outcomes as opposed to outputs. And there's a distinction between the two. But there'll be some that will be far more quantifiable than others will be. But that goal number 2, as far as our interaction with the external environment, that might present a challenge of having specific annual quantifiable goals, but certainly outputs, outcomes would certainly be a characteristic of that.
Just that it's, if not for tonight, but just a thought about the order of them. I 100% agree customers first, but we might contemplate whether the workforce is the second, that who we are is more important than the region. I'm just thinking about it that way.
They aren't necessarily in a priority order,
Okay.
but they're just numbers.
That's why it's not for tonight, but yeah, as we're thinking about what, because it can be meaningful to somebody else. of where they fall.
Not necessarily a flow of consciousness when we were discussing this, but some sort of came up more quickly than others, hence, the numbering sequence. But yeah, we can certainly reorder them if that's the preference of the board.
Typically, they don't have any numbers. The ones that I developed, they usually have buckets and no numbers and all that. So that must be.
So it sounds like we have a plan forward.
Yeah, I think so. I
Okay.
mean, thank you both for your continued work on this. You guys are making very quick time and turning this around to have a document, a draft document to us next month.
Thank
I
you all
think
for your
is
support.
Really terrific. And thank you, Josh, as well, and Beth for being part of this. And then as we do every month, we ask if there's anyone else on a board, commission, or group that has anything they'd like to report for the benefit of the group that related to transit in Alexandria. Nope. All right, we'll move on to the general manager's report. Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the board. This evening, I'm going to run through at a high level my approach on the revised budget. There's not a whole lot to talk about here, so I'll try to give you the main key takeaways. A couple of points to think about in this discussion. One is this is the feedback process. This is the opportunity for you all to contemplate any priorities that maybe I haven't attended to or you may feel are stronger than what I have outlined. As far as the budget schedule, the city manager's budget process is ongoing with council right now. They are in the add delete process. I believe the drafts were tonight. This was the first, or they were due today, due tomorrow. And as mentioned, there was a memo that came out about the supplemental. So I'm not going to be talking about any of the supplemental requests in my budget. The dash budget is a total amount. So once that amount is decided by the city, then this board has the authority to decide any line item adjustments that you feel are important as far as our operational processes. I've taken the approach this year in giving you two scenarios. When we submitted the budget, we submitted current services and we made sure that we provided some reduction scenarios for the city manager, and those were taken and we're aligned with those. In addition, in that process, the city manager did fund our ask, essentially, absent of those reductions. There is a small additional amount in 100,000 some odd dollars that is above and beyond the reduction that we submitted. It's not entirely clear what that was intended to be or where that came from, but as I mentioned in the last meeting, I was confident and we have found that to be the case, that we can make that adjustment within our budget. So we're going to make that work. So the two scenarios that I'm proposing to you start with number one, which is essentially the way that we saw OMB shake out our budget. There were some different approaches this year. One was that OMB did pull some items out of our current services budget that they deemed as supplementals. It's a terminology thing. I understand it. Each entity has its processes, and that's fine. In that process, there were a couple of items that were identified previously, as well as the reductions that we offered. So in both scenarios, the vacant position is eliminated and all the costs associated with that position. And by the time you factor in benefits and everything else, you're talking $100,000 at least. So that's a big part of our reduction, and it exists in both scenarios. In the OMB scenario and in scenario 2, there is also a reduction in our legal costs. In this particular case, though, the way it all shakes out and where this all kind of ends up is in fuel. We were very conservative about our fuel budget. Dash has exceeded the fuel budget multiple years in a row. We know that's a problem and we're trying to fix that. We were $2 and some odd cents for $2.40 in our current budget. We haven't seen $2.40 a gallon probably the entire year. So we know that that's not sustainable. And so we've addressed that. In these two scenarios, though, that you will see there is a 20-cent difference in the budgeted amount for fuel per gallon. On the OMB piece, there are some additional reductions to professional development, employee recognition, and some operator training items. Many of these we did put forth, and we acknowledge that if the board wants us to take those, we can take those. However, in scenario 2, I'm reprioritizing those, saying that professional development, as I heard the board speak about in our several months ago, and I are aligned that that's an important part of employee retention and employee development. Considering that the average cost of fuel, diesel fuel for us, because we're not paying taxes and some few other fees, is over the past 18 months was $3.53 per gallon. It spiked as high as over $4 a gallon. Over 5, thank you. It spiked higher than $5 a gallon at points this past year. So we are considering an average here, but when you think about the differences in the two scenarios, that's really where the difference is. The question becomes, do you want to put 20 cents more per gallon into the fuel budget as a contingency in fuel and take these reductions in some of these other areas? Or would you, my recommendation is to take that 20-cent reduction, knowing that $4.33 a gallon is unlikely to be exceeded on average in the coming year. We do know that OPEC has cut back supply again, and we're going into the summer months, and those are always going to be high. I'm going to ask Edward to chime in here and tell me what we're paying right now, fuel per gallon.
So as of this week, it's about 280.
About 280. So we've done a lot of ups and downs, but we were up for quite some time in the year, and that really killed us early in the year, and there was no recovering from that. So in both scenarios, regardless of what scenario the board chooses to move forward with, I feel confident that we are safe in our repetitive fuel deficit that we have experienced year over year. And that has been the #1 contributor, aside from overtime, parts and supplies. Those are the 3 real big contributors to our exceeding our budget. In the scenario 2, there is also some additional funding for the replacement of outdated equipment. As I mentioned previously, the city's IT department does not purchase and maintain our equipment. We are on the city's IT network, and we do have their email infrastructure. But as far as PCs and office equipment and everything else, that's all coming out of this budget. So we have to plan for that. We have to make sure we account for that, and we have to make sure that we're equipped for that. And our IT staff have identified that there's a number of pieces of equipment that really need to get changed out, and that's what this additional amount is in here. So, sure.
On the fuel costs, is there a way to factor in the increased use of electric buses to sort of put that cost across the entire fleet, including the electric buses, and then average it out that way?
So this has been an area that we have had asked a lot, both by the board and other entities, and I think it's a good question. The challenge we've had largely with electric has been, and I can invite Edward up to the podium to speak more about this, because he's been trying to research and trying to identify this, and he may have some perspectives, but it's a small piece that's folded in with the overall city's electric supply. So we're charged out essentially out of our budget, an allocation that's funneled through the city. The charge management pilot that we have applied for, and we're hopeful and confident we're going to get, and is included in the budget to match that, will tell us that exact information. Will tell us usage of electricity for charging buses, range, all those kinds of things, kilowatt hours. And if we can identify price, which I think has been the challenge, we could get a better sense of what that looks like. But right now, it's really, really hard to do, and we're only talking about 14 buses out of over 100.
And you understand the problem. I mean, if it were the other way around, and it were, 14 diesel buses, the price of diesel would be not that relevant. So,
That's right.
Is there impact on the 14 that we do have, utilizing them to their capacity, eliminating the dirtier, older buses? And then, because the price of gas, what is the price of gas if you're using electric as well?
Sure.
So if there were a way you could shortcut that and then not really add to the bus budget, but reduce the budget accordingly, it's such an arbitrary number. what difference does it make if when we're all electric or have one or two buses that are gas? So anyway, just a thought.
And part of this process, and I appreciate that question, is for us to hear these questions and maybe we can bring some more information in the context of the discussions in May and June as we finalize the budget. But I do appreciate that question and perspective. So this table here is essentially a breakout of the scenario 2, which is my proposed revised budget. It gives you a sense of where the money is in. You have the detail within your packet, and we've provided those aligned with each other so you can see the differences on the line item basis if you would like to look at those. But I don't plan to step through that in detail with you all this evening. But I'm happy to answer any additional questions on that approach and just remind you that from the standpoint of this process, we need to allow any public comment on this budget since it's just been revised and proposed. So we're going to allocate time for anybody to speak in May so that you can get that feedback. And then in June would be the adoption of that. We can choose to. And Martin, are we adopting the TDP in June as well? I know we did last June, May or June. So the board can also decide, and he has got some flexibility. Good news is we're kind of ahead of our schedule right now, which helps us. It gives us more time to adjust. If something were to change in the city's add delete process related to the supplementals, then certainly we would need to factor that in, and we would know that by June when you adopt the budget. But what we did last year is we just simply slotted that in at the end.
We've got Murat and Jesse.
Mine might be a simpler one. I don't know about yours, but when looking at the line items on scenario 1 and 2, right? In scenario 1, you have the operator training. And in scenario 2, there's no mention of that. And in scenario 2, there's office equipment, and then it's not mentioned in scenario 1. So it's not comparing apples to apples. Can you, like, if it's not mentioned there, it means that it's going to stay status quo? Or is that what it is? Or
I'm understanding your question correctly. So operator training went from.
what happens to operator training in scenario 2?
In scenario 2, it is funded as was originally proposed in the fall.
So no change.
So in the fall, I proposed that to be 40,000. In scenario 1, it's reduced to 32,000. And in scenario 2, it's restored to 40,000.
Unchanged. Okay. And the office equipment on scenario 2
Same.
in scenario
It would
1
be
is
the
the same.
same.
So it's gonna.
Yeah.
It's not gonna-
Pretty much, a lot of these pieces are going to be my reallocating funds within the line items to more replicate the original proposal, with the understanding that that position, for example, is cut, and so are legal services and a few other small things.
Just two quick things. One, the reduction in legal services as we head into a period of time where we know we're going to be doing very legal sensitive work around the contract negotiation. Is that accounted for in that reduction?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
we're okay.
And then I also wanted to speak to just sort of very much being in favor of scenario 2, because I think in light of our previous discussion about sort of service excellence and being an excellent organization, I think restoring the money that goes towards stewarding the employees and providing opportunity for development, I think that is genuinely a priority. So I do think scenario 2, putting that back in is pretty important.
Anyone else?
So no action is required this evening. It's just simply informational. I would say if there's anything that occurs to you after the meeting, please feel free to reach out to me. Happy to discuss any details with you. And if there are any concerns, we'll make sure we capture those and also reflect them in the final parts of the process.
And just for kind of understanding the overall, context of the budget, and then we have, a major driver is going to be changes to compensation potentially under the collective bargaining update, which you're going to get into shortly, which is not accounted for in the budget because we're still negotiating. And then the Martin's going to present on a potentially serious impact to us related to a grant program, the I-395 commuter choice, that we to reapply for a large chunk of our service. And potentially if that grant is not renewed, that also would have serious impact on the service that is out on the street. And so those, I think, are two things we have to always keep in consideration, unknowns, as we proceed on our budget.
Agreed. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the remaining items I have updates on, I'll start with collective bargaining. The union and the company met earlier this month. We had a very, very productive meeting. This is the first of several. To go back to the beginning of the meeting and your question about representation. So the First Transit contract provides representation for us. However, that representation is not the decision maker at the table. I am. So what was the case 4 years ago and is the case today, the only difference is that the individual who was here 4 years ago isn't with the company anymore. So essentially her boss is now the one who is at the table with us. Came in, as well as some other First Transit representatives, not on the legal side, just on the operational side, who know dash well have been coming here since we were in the old building. So very familiar faces. We had a very productive session. We received the union's initial proposal. We have worked through that. We spent the entire day into the early evening working through that and provided some responses as well as some company proposals. We have another session scheduled at the end of April, the 24th and 25th, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll continue that process and I'll continue to keep the board informed. At this point, the major things that we're going to have to navigate are economics. I think that the non-economic proposals and counter proposals will be able to come to agreements on. There will be some things that will linger and some things that will hang on until the very end, but I was not concerned walking out of our conversations. And I would venture to say that both parties were appreciative of each other in the process and felt that it went quite well. So we'll continue to keep you all updated, and the First Transit personnel who started with us will continue to assist us in that manner. If there were a change that TransDev were to bring forward, I would take issue with that, and I would certainly alert you all to that concern. And as our chair mentioned, when the process is said and done, we'll come to an agreement, tentative agreement that would then be signed by the head of Transit Management of Alexandria, which is the owner of the corporation that employs the workforce. But again, at the table, my emphasis was that final decisions and agreements will be coming from me, and that I represent the company in that sense. I will also be meeting with the city manager and city manager's office in order to go over the implications of the fiscal pieces of this. And as you mentioned, my budget and the city's budget do not account for any outcomes of a new collective bargaining agreement. They only assume the current wage scale steps that would have existed with the current contract. So just some things to be aware of there. The last item is just a close up on the incident involving a King Street trolley that was stolen in January. The individual who committed that crime has been in the courtroom, and that process is moving forward. On the Dash side, our safety team, led by Stephanie Salzone, who's out in the audience, did a phenomenal job fully investigating the issue, providing a comprehensive safety report to me on the outcomes. I'll just simply highlight some of the key pieces, and I will welcome anybody who would like additional information to reach out. I'll be happy to go over that with you. One key takeaway was the bus was secured, but not fully secured in the proper manner, which enabled the person who took the bus to simply stomp on the accelerator long enough that the engine was able to overpower and drag the brakes. So the trolley was taken and driven with the brakes applied the entire time. It is possible to do that. That is not a design defect. If the vehicle is not properly secured and it remains in a geared position, that can happen with someone who doesn't know how to operate a bus. Generally, that doesn't happen though if proper securement is followed. The driver has been coached and that has been addressed. The driver has been retrained and certified before being sent back out into revenue service. In addition, an emergency policy was issued from my office, promptly letting everyone know of the requirements for securing buses and the repercussions for not properly securing buses. We have committed with the workforce to alert them of this and to be a partner in helping to make sure that when it's not happening, we're working with them to be better. But in the longer term, we have let them know that we will also be regularly auditing that and inspecting that and addressing bus operators who continue to improperly secure a vehicle. So I'm confident in the team's approach and response to that, and I thank them for that and want to let you all know that we continue to be a safe system and are again thankful for the operator for putting himself in harm's way to stop the situation. And we're hopeful that the individual will be prosecuted accordingly. And that's the end of my report. And turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Josh. And so for Edward, it's just if we have questions for his
I
financial-
apologize. Yeah, we're this new format. Yes, I'll just briefly mention our year-end deficit remains pretty much unchanged. Again, this was incurred early in the year and has not been able to be recovered. With that said, we have made significant strides in over time. Our hiring process has really netted some really positive gains and results. And our training department has really kicked it into high gear in our HR department. So we are staffed to the level now where overtime is no longer exceeding our budgetary amount, which is a really important milestone for us. But again, all of that overtime was already incurred. So the year-end deficit remains unchanged. And this SAO has been submitted and is ongoing within the city's process, I believe.
We have a supplemental appropriation ordinance coming in April. We're going to address this issue in June.
Okay, thank you. That will be the end of my.
All right, Martin's coming up to the podium.
All right, good evening. So we've got Josh, do I have the clicker? You got it. Okay, good.
Here you go. Well, yeah, you only have 2 slides. So.
That's true. I went through anyways. So for item 6A, we've got a ridership update. A month-by-month ridership is shown in the blue line at the top of this graph. Just want to highlight that we had 340,000 boardings in the month of February. For those of you that follow us on social media, hopefully all of you, you will know that you already know that that's a record for Dash in the month of February. So of our 39 Februarys we've been around, that's the highest ridership we've ever had in the month of February. So really happy to report that. And we've seen the March numbers, the preliminary numbers have come in. They're also looking good. So I think we're beginning to see that really seasonal kind of downturn that we typically see in December, January, and February has not happened this year for many reasons, I think. So it might be the weather, might also be that we're better meeting the year-round needs of the community. So happy to report that. Any questions on the ridership?
And I would add, as we talk about financials, Dash's ridership performance drives many of the calculations that are done on a federal level for the appropriation of formula funding to this region and to Alexandria. Much of that money is used to pay for Metro at this point, but we contribute towards that allocation. And so these high ridership numbers will serve to continue to increase that in the future.
I thought you were going to mention that the federal government's still not back to normal,
And that's true. That's true as well.
Which is starting. It sounds like there's some indication that might be changing a little bit next couple of weeks and months. So we'll see how that goes.
Say more about that, Martin.
I don't have any information.
I mean, because it's been, I work for the federal government, as I know to several of our colleagues, and I mean, it's been very much an agency by agency decision. And so my agency actually is giving up office space because they're doubling down on a, hybrid schedule that is very heavy on telework. It does seem maybe some agencies that were, maybe still saying, oh, we're operating out of this way because of a state of emergency are continuing, but I don't know that you can say that uniformly. It seems like every agency is going to kind of go in the direction that makes the most sense for them. And yeah, I think we're getting close to what that baseline is going to be as we go on now, to at least what federal workforce might contribute to trips that are being taken. It's probably going to be harder that we're going to see much more fluctuation after May, but
yeah, makes sense.
The emergency.
My observation was just based on what I've heard about specifically the Pentagon and Mark Center. So I don't know if that's
DoD specifically, maybe going back to more. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the item 6B on the agenda is an update on the commuter choice program. You'll remember we brought this to the board a couple months back to get a resolution of support for our 2 grants that we're applying for.
just a refresher, the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission manages this program. It allocates the 395 express lane toll revenue towards projects that will reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles that travel through the corridor on a daily basis. So you have a lot of projects that are transit service enhancements, but then you also have capital projects like VRE station expansions, things like that. But Dash has been very successful with this grant program in its first 4 years. It operates in 2-year cycles. So the first 2 cycles, we received significant funding for our line 35, which was formerly the AT1 Plus, and our line 36AB, which was formerly the AT9. And so significant percentage of the trips that we run today on those routes are funded by this program. So we're applying for the 3rd cycle here, which is about to enter the public outreach phase of its process. NVTC will be coming out with a staff recommendation towards the end of next week, and that will mark the start of the public comment period. So we'll have an idea then, where we stand. I think it's been a very competitive year. Probably this is a record for the highest number of requests that have been made for the program. We've got $88 million of requests with 48 million available. So very competitive. There's 16 projects that have applied. So we want to make the best case that we can to make sure that we're being competitive. As David mentioned, this is a huge part of the service we operate in these routes. As we know, line 35 is our highest performing route, and line 36 is also very high in our rankings. So we're going to be, we are aggressively reaching out to community groups to try and get their involvement, kind of make sure that we are highlighting who's benefiting from these routes, getting them involved in the NVTC outreach process. So that'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks. And we'll be looking for other ways as well to kind of convey the importance of these routes, including what would happen if we didn't get this one. So that's all I can share right now. We'll have more information. I think next Friday is when they actually release the recommendations for which projects will be funded, but it'll go through an outreach process with NVTC making the final decision that goes on to the Commonwealth Transportation Board in the end. Any questions?
Martin, I was going to make a suggestion, talk with Josh about this. As you all know, we're meeting a week earlier to accommodate a public hearing and any input in our budget process. And so then we're not going to be meeting again until mid-May. And so it's not great timing for the public comment period for this process, because by the time we get together, it may either be just ending, we may be in the last day or two, or it may even be over already.
I think we might be before, because it's April 17th and it goes a month. So we should.
Oh, it's going to go to May 17th. Okay, and we're meeting on May 10th, because I was going to suggest that we might want to give preliminary approval to draft a letter if we are not, in fact, selected as recommended to be funded, that we do that tonight, so that way staff can start working on such a letter and circulate it if need be, because our board certainly would want to, it'd be a travesty for us not to weigh in on it if we're not one of the projects that are recommended, because as Martin said, this is hugely successful. It also, for the city, when you look at where did extra resources go to, these 2 routes got the funding because of this commuter choice program. The city did a supplemental last year in their budget. They added money for the 30. But everything else that's sort of been changed was just kind of moving around dollars within the system. So if we were to see reductions on this, so much of what is the new, that people know is the new Dash network, just ceases to exist. And, for the city, that's going to be an issue that they're going to have, from a perception standpoint, going to have to wrestle with. But all that's to say that I think we need to be prepared to do that. And if folks are comfortable with giving direction to staff, that we can begin working on a letter so that we can participate in the public comment process. Although it does look like we'd have a week when we get back together in May. But let me just throw that out for discussion, see where folks fall on that. I'm seeing folks nodding. Okay. Okay. So I think, Linda, were you gonna, you were just, so if we could have a motion essentially to allow us to, we would want to comment regardless, but I think to have a letter that specifically addresses what the impact of the loss of this service would be and what it means to our riders and mobility in Alexandria, I think that would be appropriate if we could get a motion on the table. Okay, so Matt's gonna make the motion, and is there a second? Steve, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Yeah, yeah. That's right. Yeah, because you see both those routes stopping in the Mark Center. So that was a big strategy of the. Yeah, we're talking, actually, yeah, we're talking about when we can get in there, because that is something I want to do because of its transit accessibility, and that may be an important point to emphasize that the 35 and 36 are not as robust as they were. So thank you for doing that. So that's something we will have a draft ready to go, and we will hope that it is a letter that ends up being in a very positive in talking about, that we agree with the recommendations, but we're getting the sense that regionally, this is a program that has grown tremendous. As Martin said, it's over about double the amount of projects versus what's available. It's a funding source that other jurisdictions are becoming aware of and have very strong projects for that are important for the region. I'm not saying that any of the projects are not, but we have to stick up for what is important to Alexandria and the mobility of our citizens. And so that's what we'll be doing if it comes down to it. Bless you. As a result of it. And I appreciate that staff is being proactive about engaging other groups and our riders, and hopefully our rider advisory committee as well, who I saw just did a letter on the budget. Hopefully they will do one on this as well, to ensure that we speak up for why we need the current amount of service that we have.
And there was just one other item I wanted to, it's not on the agenda, but the WMATA Better Bus Network project will be coming back to this group next month with kind of the full, not the recommendations, but the first network that they are bringing to the public. This is kind of, Hillary's talked about it in the past meetings, but this is the regional bus network redesign project. It's kind of following a similar path to what we did with the ATV. It doesn't affect dashed routes, but it can affect, and it does affect potentially Metro bus service within Alexandria. So we weren't sure the extent to which Metro bus routes within Alexandria would be adjusted or recommended to be adjusted through this project. It seems like there will be some adjustments. So we'll go through those in more detail next month, but I just wanted to highlight that they'll be coming out with, they'll be sharing the network on the 17th of April. So we have a lot of different outreach efforts going on for different projects next couple of weeks. And then the outreach will continue through the spring, and then they'll come back with a final network recommendation in fall of 23. So the fall of this year, potentially implementing the following fiscal year. So they're moving very quickly on this project. So just want to make sure that no one is caught off guard, but we'll have more specific next month.
And Martin or Hillary, could you remind us, is this an unconstrained vision like ours was, or what are the parameters that?
Right. So this is phase 2 of the project. Phase 3 will be in the fall. So for phase 2, it is just a visionary network. So it is not necessarily constrained. There is a significant increase in the number of hours that they would be running, and this would be more of kind of a 4 to 5 years out. With phase 3, which is what they'll come out to the public in the fall, that would probably be more constrained. That would be more implementable within the next fiscal year. So that's when we'll see the more difficult trade-offs, I think.
Should we be expecting to see reductions in some routes, or is this all to be, I mean, if you can't say, yeah, that's fine. But
Actually, honestly, I mean, with the visionary network, the major increase in service, no, not as much. I mean, they're trying to provide new connections, serve the city better. But once we get to the constrained network, they haven't developed that yet, but that's possible. There could be some. So
phase 2 is something that people are probably going to be mostly excited about, because it's going to probably do things that are better and not say, here are trade-offs that, well, we have to do these trade-offs in order to accomplish. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have come to the end of our agenda for tonight. I'm sitting next to Matt, so I saw he wrote where and over where our next meeting. So we were scheduled to be at City Hall next month, and so we have that noted in the City Hall Council workroom. I did want to say I had scheduled, when I had done the scheduling in terms of when we were at City Hall versus here, I actually had in my mind that May was when we were going to have a public hearing. We are going to allow for additional input on the budget. So I am okay with us being here if that is the preference of the group, since we actually ended up being here for our major public hearing. We actually couldn't get a room at City Hall tonight. So do folks have a preference as to whether, show of hands, would you like to meet here? Show of hands. Would you like to meet at City Hall? Show of hands. Oh, okay. City Hall wins. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, it's walking distance for me, but I was going to be neutral because I know sometimes that's. Well, okay, yeah, let me give you an update on that. So last month we talked about the having a meeting, which I very much want to do at the Del Pepper Community Resource Center. And Beth actually reached out to the DCHS, who schedules that, and they said because the move is still ongoing, they are not willing to schedule for outside groups yet. So we couldn't get a meeting date yet, but we're going to try again in a month to see if we can either do June or September there, because I very much want us to have a meeting there. And I think it sounds like you've been in the building, so I'm thinking the technology situation that we struggle with a bit at the city hall is going to be a little better there, and it meets the criteria of having a transit center almost right outside, which is important that people can get there. And hopefully folks on the west, it'll be the first time we ever meet on the west end as a board formally. So I would like to, we're close to Quaker Lane, but we're not on the other side of it. So yeah, so that's something we're committed to doing. So we will have an update on that. So it's like City Hall, it shall be. So for May. Is there any further business to come before the board tonight? I'll take a motion to adjourn. Move Melinda. Matt's gonna vote no. Second by Matt, all in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Happy Passover to those who celebrate and happy Easter to those this weekend who observe the holiday.